Hello and welcome everyone to the Rangers Journal. It's Friday night and we're here to talk about probably the Hearts game, but more than likely talk about the disastrous week that we've had as Rangers fans. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by a great panel, I guess. I'll come to you first, Dylan. Are you okay, mate? Thanks for coming on.
Aye, good. Wasn't so good the other night when we were going over that tactics board that we dropped, the breakdown of the game. That brought back some memories, but apart from that, mate, all good, aye.
Well, feel free to drop in some of your tactical knowledge in that. Doug, yourself, mate, how are you?
Yeah, it's not too bad, not too bad. I don't know if it's controversial these days, but I took advantage of the sale that's on at the store and I bought myself the away top, so I'm looking forward to that arriving on Monday.
Oh, you can wear it on Monday's pod then, can't you? Cammy, yourself, mate, how are you?
I'm good. It's been an interesting week. Usually I get the opportunity to speak fairly quickly after an embarrassing result, so it's been interesting just to have a few days to try to process what's going on and what's going to happen moving forward. But looking forward to this hour of therapy.
Well, as a fine wine matures, I'm sure your opinions will have matured over the last couple of days, Cam. It's glad that it didn't get you on a Monday to have your first pressings to the world to hear. But let me stay with you, Cam. So what stood out for me this week is the Rangers fans are fuming, and we've been fuming a lot of times over the years, but right now I can't think of a worse time. But yet there is silence up until the press conferences today, silence all week from the top all the way down to the management team and to the social media team. What's your thoughts on that?
It's an interesting strategy. I've always had issues with the way that Rangers as a football club communicate with us as the supporters. Obviously the CEO and the chairman are just in the building. Both appear to have been quite regulars across the hospitality lounges and quite happy to speak to the people that are paying thousands of pounds every season for their expensive tables and all that sort of stuff. But the 45,000 season ticket holders and everybody else appears to be just like, it doesn't show any sign of leadership for me. The fact that there has been no, we remain fully behind Philip Clement. What was said in January remains the case, yada, yada, yada. It's not going to get a great response because the 99.9% of the Rangers support, I think, is of the opinion that Philip Clement's time as Rangers manager is drawn to an end. It is inevitable how this ends. But I feel sorry for the people in the social media. The people that's their actual job. They're being told by those above them to follow a certain way. There's been various things haven't been recognised this week. They've just taken the approach of radio silence. It's not the way that I would like to go about it. But I think they can't really win whatever way that they actually play it, because the majority of us hold the same opinion. But we'll dig into the actual that opinion and how it's made up and that sort of thing. But the silence, once we got past Tuesday, I found it quite. I don't think I've ever in my lifetime, particularly on Rangers social media, ever heard just complete silence, nothing at all coming from the club, which tells you how massive a disappointment and an embarrassment that Sunday actually was. And I still don't think that the manager truly understands how embarrassing that was. In my lifetime watching Rangers, that's probably the worst that I've ever seen, to be honest with you. And I've seen some crackers over the years.
Dylan, let me come to yourself on the similar kind of point. It's been silence all week. Cammy makes a point that I guess if I sum it up, is damned if they do, damned if they don't. What would you have liked to have seen this week from other than the manager sacking, if that is what you believe? But what do you think they could have done differently?
Well, to be honest with you, Billy, I think Cammy's got it spot on. I don't think they can really do anything. They came out a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, and said that they're fully behind Clement, but it's not a cast iron guarantee. So if they're not going to sack him, they're not going to come out and say we're still fully behind him, because he only said it last month. So it's a strange one. I don't agree with the silence, but I don't know what they could say apart from if they're going to sack him and they come out and that's what they say. Listen, we're going to sack him. But to come out just to say we're still fully behind this guy, they can't come out and say we're fully behind him until the end of the season. Then we're going to sack him. So they're kind of they shot themselves in the foot with the last statement they made and the comments they made in that, and obviously didn't foresee this happening. And now they're in a predicament where their hands are tied and they can't really come out and say anything. But would we like to hear it as fans? Absolutely, because somebody has to come up and front that embarrassment of that defeat. And like Clement said, I don't think Clement gets it at all. And you can tell that with his press of the day, which is ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. Doug, do you think it's fair that maybe they should have put someone out, maybe one of the players, to come out and own it, maybe Tav, to apologise to the fans?
I don't think the majority of fans care about what Tav says anymore, to be honest.
No, fair enough.
They've got the and that's coming from me, who the greatest lover of Tav and all, but most people, and even I can see it myself. Most people are pretty bored of hearing the same sentences, and Tav's obviously got his kind of media training sorted, and he does tend to say the same things over and over again. The phrase about being disappointed being the big one that gets talked on. So, to be honest, I don't think people would really care unless he was to come out and say something totally radical. If he came out and said, "You know what, I hate Clement, he's rubbish, and we should get rid of him," it would need to be that level of radical, I think, for people to actually really care. I do want to point out something that the fan advisory board recently put out some minutes from the meeting they had with them in January, and this was just before the game happened. But they talked about fan engagement and communication in that, and one of the things that they said, and I quote, "Emphasis was placed on the necessity of transparent, grounded communication with the fan base to rebuild trust and establish realistic expectations," end quote. So where is it? They've said similar things in similar briefings before. They've talked about the fact that they want to get better communication, and yet we still just don't see any evidence of it. It's a perfect example of they're saying nothing, and so the void is getting filled with just rumours and all sorts. For a couple of days, it was an absolute fact that we couldn't afford to sack Clement, and that's why it wasn't happening. And then they eventually came out and said, no, that's not the case. Probably because that rumour got to such a level of belief. And that's all that will keep happening. If they say nothing, the gaps will just get filled by one rumour or the next. And that just makes the infighting and feeling crap and everything else all the worse.
Cammy, you were going to come in on that?
It's just basically actions speak louder than words. Rangers as a football club across recent years, different people, James Bisgrove, etc., they've all talked the talk, but the proof's in the pudding. How you operate as a football club and how the team that goes on the park. I'm frustrated by words. It's just constant buzz phrases, and I think another thing that was referenced within the minutes that Doug refers to was about a Rangers style of, I can't remember if it was like a Rangers style of play or a club style. That again is just words. Does anybody actually know what this defined style of play is? Is somebody actually going to communicate? Is Niels Koppen the person that's overseeing that? I just think we're a very dysfunctional football club from top to bottom. I don't think there's anything that we do is joined up. But it's something I've said many times. Actions speak louder than words, and that applies to the chairman, the CEO, the manager, the players. What you do by your actions, whatever your role is across the football club, that's what you're measured by. No, just coming up with buzz phrases that you've heard on some training course.
Dylan, let's turn to the players for a couple of minutes, because the fans, the manager's lost the fans. I think that's, as Cammy said, 99%. I know we maybe live in an online bubble where we could see everything as we're trapped in the kind of opinions, but I think it's fair to say most of the fans have lost. But the players, do you still see them buying into what Clement's doing, whatever that may be?
I don't think the players looked like, even though the tempo was so bad, and I don't think the players have really put him under the bus, which is quite surprising for me. I thought it would have happened long ago, but I still think they are playing for him, and I've no idea why. Well, up until now, I would say that. We'll see that on Sunday after the Hearts game. If the players just turn up and chuck it, and then you'll have your answer for that. But up until now, I don't think he's lost the dressing room. No, I think the players are still trying enough to say that he's still in control. But last week was an absolute disgrace. The way they turned up, the tempo. But again, they had nothing to fall back on in terms of style of play or tactics wise. It was just hope for the best and turn up, and none of them did, to be honest.
Doug, do you think that the powers that be at the club are waiting for one or two things? One, for the European campaign to either come to an end or come to a grand victorious conclusion, or just wait till the end of this, like kick the can to the end of the season, no matter what happens?
I kind of get the impression that they've the will to see it out a bit more in terms of, I think they're looking at it in terms of the sort of the rebuild and thinking we should give them more time to effect that. And because they made a point about the whole sacking manager type thing as well. So I feel like they're more committed to that concept, regardless of what's happening, than everyone else is. People have talked about, as I said, them not being able to afford to sack him. I don't think that's true. We can easily afford to do that. They don't want to spend that money. Obviously, you don't want to have ended up wasting money by having to sack a manager in this team, but they could do it if they wanted. But I wonder if, and particularly because the people at the top are obviously still new. At the end of the day, they are still finding their feet. I know some people look at it going, "Oh, they've been in there for 3 months," but you have to think about how much we've been complaining about how bad everything is, and they're stepping into that, and then their job's to try and fix it. So it's not like 3 months is actually that long of a time, and if you frame it in that context. So I feel like maybe they're sitting there going, well, there's so much gone wrong. Maybe we need to get these things fixed to then judge him properly. And therefore, from their perspective, they're willing to give him more leeway. As I say, there are things you could point to if you want to make arguments. If you're a Clement supporter, you could argue that he's had injuries. You could argue that there was, the stadium stuff at the beginning of the season. And all this stuff in the background that's apparently not working efficiently to the point where, they've had to bring in a team to review it externally. So I think that in their minds, those things are bigger components than we care about them, because ultimately we don't really care. Most people don't really care about the stuff that happens off the park until it's affecting the stuff that's happening on the park. So I think, we're just looking at it and going, right, well, it's not happening on the park, so we need to fix that first and foremost ahead of everything else. Whereas they're looking at it from a more holistic, we need to fix the club, and thusly we're willing to give them more time. And do you know what? I just think if they would actually just come out and say, if that was the case, if they came out and said that, a lot of people probably still wouldn't be happy. They'd still want Clement sacked straight away. But at least they could go, well, at least we know what's happening, and at least we know why he's still there. And to me, that's actually the biggest problem. It's not that they've made one decision or the other. It's the fact that they're just not telling us about what their thoughts about the situation and what the plan is.
Cammy, still touching on that, and also something that I read, I think it was Josh Black mentioned up there, that Patrick Stewart only has one chance to make a first impression, and this first impression that he's given the fans at the moment maybe isn't something that's going to stand him in good stead for the future.
That's he's spot on with regard to that. But I think if you were winning games on the pitch, you know, he was appointed, or he first started on the 18th of December, the day before we've lost a League Cup final that we should have won. He then beat them on the 2nd of January. What's happening? I mean, I think Doug says that. What happens on the park is that everything else goes by the wayside. I mean, I'm sure across the city there's issues that they have with people running their club and what have you, but it's put to the back burner, and they generally only moan about it once a year at their AGM in between talking about Rangers. But he's not had a great start, to be honest with you. But I think if you were winning games on the park, and that game on Sunday, my thing was, I genuinely thought what they said in January was the away fixtures, the away form has been abysmal across the last 8 or 9 months. We go to Hearts, we go to Kilmarnock, we go across the city, and we go to Aberdeen, I think, something like that, before the split. So I think if you'd got through in the Scottish Cup, he was going to be measured by that. The game on Sunday's totally thrown that plan into the air, sort of thing. But I do think that ultimately, between now and the split, that's where I believe the sort of line in the sand will be, if he gets to that stage in early April, just prior to season ticket renewals, etc. If the club aren't planning in the background for his replacement, I would be worried, because you can't just bury your head in the sand. You should always be contingency planning or succession planning, regardless of how you're doing, to be honest with you. You know, so it's he's not had a great start, but I'm not prepared to slaughter the guy. Give him the opportunity. But early signs with regard to communication, we are bringing a communications director in on the 1st of May or 1st of April or something like that. Good luck with that job.
Mm-hmm. Dylan, fundamentally, it seems like for a few years this club hasn't been, I would say, broken. To be fair, and obviously we don't do an independent review unless Patrick Stewart thinks that I might be onto something with that. But is that top to bottom the reason? I mean, what are the reasons that it's got as bad as this? And I'm not even just talking about on the park results. I'm talking about the kind of infighting with the board and just the kind of behind the scenes stuff. Not having a CEO, not having a chief executive, all these kind of things.
I think that the people in charge are incapable of doing their job, and that's what it's staying for. I think the last manager that we employed in the summer was Gerrard, if I'm not mistaken. I think Gio came in halfway through to take over from him, then Gio came in halfway through, and then Clement. So that's why I'm against getting rid of him now, because I don't want this other manager walking into this pile of shit, to be honest with you, and having to pick the bones of it and try and lift the players for a meaningless end of the season. So for me, I would just stick with him, let him see it out, see you later in the summer. But in terms of your question, I think it's good that we're now getting these people in, like the chief executive and Patrick Stewart, etc. in. But I think, like Cam said, it's a wee bit too early to judge them. Ideally, you would like him to come out and say something about it, or somebody to come out and say something about it. But like I referred to the last point I made, what can I really say? It would be good if they come out and say, look, we know this isn't right, we really apologise. But if the manager's not coming out in the presser and saying that, and he's the one that should take most of the blame for me, no Patrick Stewart. It wasn't him that picked the team, it wasn't him that set the tactics up. So then I don't see him coming out to do it. And I think that after Gerrard left, we kind of just spiralled sort of downhill, not in terms of the manager and team-wise, but in terms of board level as well. And Dave King and that left as well. Everyone just seemed to go all over the place, and we were happy with that where we are now, second place. and it's just not been good enough since then. But hopefully the guys that are coming in can now start to get us back to a place. And the first thing I would do in the summer, like I said, is get rid of the manager, get one with a better state of play, and then start from there. A manager to focus on performance rather than results, because performance will then lead to results. So hopefully that's what my take on it. But like I said, mate, I think it just went to pot once Dave King and Gerrard kind of left, and we just stagnated.
Mm-hmm. Doug, sacking Clement just now, if that had to happen, do you think that would actually change anything in the bigger picture for the club? Not just for this season, but just would it be back on that merry-go-round again, or do you think it actually would be a beneficial thing to do at the moment?
Well, it'd be beneficial in terms of fan engagement, because that's what most fans want. So, you get a quick win. But one thing I'll say is that, I think that's part of the reason, referring to what you're mentioning a minute ago, as to how we've gotten to where we are, is a board that kept looking for quick wins and kept having to fight fires. There wasn't enough long-term planning. It reminds me a little about how the political system works these days. No one makes any meaningful change because meaningful change requires long-term planning. But politicians don't plan long-term; they plan for the next election, and it's kind of similar, I think, into how we got back up, and it was all about getting that title, and stopping the 10. That became the big thing, and then we got that. But it doesn't feel like there'd been any thought about what was going to happen after, and so from that point we've just kind of been wavering about ever since. So I do think there needs to be more long-term planning, and again, if that's the reason that they're going, look, if we sack him now, we're just going to get an interim in anyway before we get someone in the summer. And so they're going, well, what's the point? We'll just leave it just now. If we just leave him in place for 6 months, we'll have to pay him out less when we do sack him. Then fine. And that's something they couldn't come out and say, obviously. You couldn't come out and say, well, actually, we do plan to sack him in the summer, but we want to pay him less, so we're leaving him for now. And part of a good board, part of a good CEO is perhaps to be sitting there making that decision and then going, right, I'm going to be a man of hatred for the next 6 months, and I'm going to have to soak that up. So if that's a possibility, then that's fine. That's a potential option, but it will mean that, like I say, it will mean he'll continue to be a hated man for that time. But if it turns out it's part of a long-term plan, then ultimately he'll get the applause for it. But I do think that's what needs to happen. Long-term planning. Like I say, they've got this review. A lot of people, I think, are confusing the review a little in terms of being a more football-focused thing, whereas the review is all about how we do things, and particularly how we do it sort of off-field. So that's why we're starting to see changes with the academy and bringing in new people, talking about focusing on that 18-year-old zone. I think those are the types of things that are going to be a result of the review, not, okay, we've done the review, we're going to sack Clement. That's not what it's about.
I'm going to go switch it back the other way and come to Dylan, because I've got something to come to Cammy with in a wee second. But Dylan, touching on what Doug said there about the kind of falling apart when Gerrard and King left, do you think Gerrard leaving was because he wasn't going to be back the way that he felt he needed to be? He made that very famous comment about fixing your roof when the sun's shining. Is that maybe, rather than it was a Premier League club coming in for him, it was just he wasn't getting backed?
I think the Premier League was more than no being backed. I think if Aston Villa hadn't come in for him, he would have stayed. But it was also his pal that was down there, wasn't it, that sort of took him over to Aston Villa. I think he was the executive director or something like that at Aston Villa. So he had that relationship there. But not being backed on top of winning the league, I think that maybe made the decision easier for him, but I think he'd have still went regardless, mate. And the fact a lot of fans would take him back, but no for me. Not after you walk out Rangers, you don't get another chance. You know what I mean? So, not for me.
Well, why I wanted to come to you, Cammy, because I had a point written down here. Are the fans been taken for mugs? And I feel like of us, you probably get a finger on the pulse. No offence to anybody else if I'm wrong with that, but you certainly give us fan opinions. So, season ticket renewals coming up. If they keep Clement on, are people going to renew?
I think that retaining the existing season ticket holders, of which people have had season tickets for 35, 40 years, I think you see the empty seats across the course of the last 4 or 5 months. Other than the game on the 2nd of January, Ibrox has not been full, and that's telling. The amount of people that are the amount of people that stay in the pub before the game, the amount of people that seat sub, the amount of people that just don't. I think we are, as a support, taking for granted. I do believe that the fact that the executives have been going round the hospitality lounges and quite happy to communicate with those supporters. We're all Rangers supporters, whether we pay £35 on a match day or you pay £3,500 for your season ticket. We all deserve to be treated the same, with the same courtesy. It'll be interesting. It's been spoke about many times across recent years about a waiting list. Join my Jers for the waiting list, etc. That's the only way you can get a season ticket, all that sort of stuff. The proof will be in the pudding in about 10, 12 weeks' time, when the deadline has passed. I'm sure there are people waiting for a season ticket, so I think anybody that does, maybe the people that are waiting on the waiting list aren't as scarred as many of the rest of us. You know, they maybe only get to 3 or 4 games a season, and they'll jump at a season ticket. I mean, I've joked about it that my wee boy's desperate to get a season ticket. That might be the only positive that actually comes out of this debacle, that I end up being able to go to the games with him. But it's I think I'm just reading that comment. But I think that's to be honest with you, loyalty and habit will see a lot of Rangers fans still renew, but there will be people that will just make the decision that I'm just not getting any enjoyment out of this. I can't justify £800, £900, £1,000, whatever it may be. So I genuinely think that the club the Rangers support has always been taken for granted. I go all the way back to David Murray. David Murray got away with it because he was across his tenure as chairman was hugely successful on the park. But Rangers have never. We're only good for bringing out strips and that sort of thing. They don't actually. You're just a number. Whether you've been a season ticket holder, the guy that Gordon talking about his father-in-law. Rangers don't care that you've had a season ticket for 40 years. They just know that they think that they'll have somebody else that will come and take your place. That loyalty doesn't account for anything. I'm in the same position as his father-in-law. I will still renew because I support Rangers. I don't support individuals. I support the football club. But I've said this on podcasts before, Billy. I've never felt so detached and so. I don't feel a part of Rangers Football Club. And that's when you start to question, can I do better things with my Saturday? But I want to pass that baton on to my son, and I want to enjoy times going to Ibrox with him and all that sort of stuff. So that almost forces you on. But to answer your question, Scotty did tell me to go for it a wee bit, to be honest. But I just think that as part of this communication, we need to actually see. We just actually need to see a vision. I mean, Doug speaks about a long-term plan and all that sort of stuff. I'm all for structure and I'm all for organisation across the football club and see what's going on. But ultimately, it comes down to what happens on the pitch and winning games. I've said this. I am a broken record. Winning games of football, lifting trophies, masks a lot of things. Rangers across the last however many years, you go back 20 years, and other than we won the league back to back under Walter, 3 years in the trot. Across the last 20 years, Rangers haven't been successful. That lot have dominated across the last 20 years, the number of trophies. So this isn't something that's just suddenly happened. Rangers have been, Rangers have been treading water for a long time, and there's so many things on and off the park that have to be fixed. But the short answer, yes, we are being taken for granted.
Doug, staying on the same theme, are the fans too loyal then for their own good? Are we needing to do something more than just continue to throw our money into the club without having any kind of representation at board level, for instance?
I would love for fans to have representation at board level. I'm a fan of the kind of fan model. I think it works superbly in Germany, for example, where they've got great attendance, they've got great community. I think it's part of why the second Bundesliga is such a good league as well. Arguably even better than the Bundesliga in terms of the community aspect and the just the joy of going to see football with your pals and that kind of thing. There's a lot of really traditional teams there now as well. I think there's actually now more Bundesliga winning teams in the second division than there are in the first division. So there's a lot of history and things like that. And listening to Cammy there, the thing that really makes me sad is that idea about that. A lot of people will renew, like because it's habit, and a lot of people will renew for. One of the things I've talked about is people support the team, on the park. They support Rangers, the team that's on the park, and they will always support the team that's on the park, regardless of what's happening elsewhere, because that's where that's the real, there's the connection there between yourself and the players and the winning and the memories that happens on the park. But if you really want to make the best success of your club, and the thing that they need to protect that they are letting fall away is the community, and the aspect that Cammy's talking about there, taking his son to the game and building memories that are not just about Rangers, it's about his family and that passing on of tradition and history. And my dad took me, whose dad took him. And so you end up with stories that get passed on. Like my dad is full of stories. He loves telling this story about how he wore a Celtic shirt at Ibrox. He actually wore a Sporting Lisbon top because it was a European thing, and they had a bunch of players, a bunch of kids wearing various shirts. But he always spins it, and he tells it, and it's a great little story. He tells it every time when he's drunk. And it's something that I always remember him telling because he's told it 100 times, and I'll probably hear it 100 more. And it's a story I'll always remember from him when he's young. And that's the type of thing that I think starts to die when the fans are neglected, and that's the type of things that they'll lose out on because they'll not have that extra love anymore. They won't want to do it. It's less. You don't want to have to take your son when you're losing games like that at the Cups. You want to be going to those games to build those memories. And that's for me the real worry is that you start to lose that, and that's when clubs die really and become then the soulless things that make money. I think that's what's happening, in their bigger leagues where all they want to get the tourist fans in, and that's something for me that I think is still special about this club. Because we've not been ruined by the money in terms of the league sort of thing, we still have a lot of that tradition, and that's what sets us apart and makes Ibrox a special place. And that's the worry for me, that if things carry on that way, that's what we'll lose, and that really will be the end of the club if that happens.
Cammy, you want to come in on that?
Just while Doug's speaking there, very well put, Doug. And Nicholas Stubborn is saying, best thing now is to get behind the club. If anyone doesn't want their season ticket, give it up. Someone will take it that want to be there. That's the kind of statement I would expect to come for the club, to be honest with you. That's, that just get behind the club. Your opinion doesn't matter. Just let them continue to do what they're doing. Somebody else will take their place. The fact you've been gone for 40, 50, 60 years doesn't matter. So I just had to, that just got on my goat. Rangers supporters couldn't get behind the club anymore. Financially, the money that Rangers supporters have put in, I reckon I'm probably £1,500 easy this season. multiply that across the support, the Bears that travel home, abroad, all that sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? They are taken for granted. You know, this wee walk that they do around the stadium, clapping the fans and all that sort of stuff. It's a lot of nonsense. Do that when you're shown a trophy at the end of a season. This at the end of games is a lot of modern football claptrap, to be honest with you. You know what I mean? But the Rangers support can't do anymore. And it's been said before, we deserve better. Think back a few weeks at Ibrox when the Union Bears, I'm not advocating what the Union Bears did on the 55th minute, but look at the reaction that some of the fans inside the stadium. We're not joined up as a support. There's too many factions within the support, and too many people have got issues with other people, you know. So, sorry, I'll give somebody else a chance to talk. Billy, sorry.
Well, okay. No, well said, Cammy, and I agree with the walking around after every game seems strange to me. But anyway, Dylan, is maybe the board silence this week emphasise the fact that they don't really fear the fans or fear the fans' reaction anymore?
I don't know if the silence says that, but I definitely think that's the consensus amongst fans, that they don't really, like Cammy said, they don't really care. And that parading around the pitch, like you said, that really, really does man nothing, because, and this is part of the problem, they're getting, and I see this on the tactical breakdown the other night, their small achievements are getting made bigger. So that last European 8, well done, but it's getting made into this big, massive deal. Well, that's the standard you should be hitting, if that makes sense. So and that's where we fell short in the past sort of years across the club, is finishing runners-up in the cup spoke about because it was a missed penalty. Any day, you never won the cup. So that's no, again, it goes to in the statement today saying, well, we were runners-up in the cup. It doesn't matter. You don't get any medals or any trophies, sorry, for being the runner-up. So, it's these small achievements that are getting made, and Clement loves to make them a lot bigger. Or we won it 3-0 away to Dundee United, they said today. And I'm like, you're winding me up. You should be winning away to Dundee United. Doesn't matter if it's 1 or 3-0, you should be winning regardless. So I think that's where the standards are held now. But again, because the board have always sort of been silent since the full of this season, and just because these new guys have come in, I think we were maybe expecting a wee bit more engagement from them in terms of fans. But like Bill said, they're still trying to figure out the mess that we're in and deal with all that. And also, again, it goes back to what do they come out and say? Do they come out and say that they're still going to back him? If they come out and say that and they're still going to back him for the next season, then I think a lot of fans don't renew their tickets. I think that's so they can't come out and say that. But they can also kind of come out and say, oh, we're planning to sack him, because then Clement just says, oh, we'll no bother and just sits with a cigarette for 6 months and gets paid for nothing. So it's a tricky one. Ideally, as fans, we would all love some sort of communication there for them to come out, or some sort of apology, I should say, even from the manager himself. I think that's the damning thing as well. In the press conference, he's not willing to take any responsibility. It's all about the rebuild and the young kids and the injuries he's had, and it's poor me, and he gets the violin out, and it's just not good enough. And that's where we are right now as a club, and that stems from the board all the way down. And hopefully, the end of this season, because this one for me is just written off. I'm not going back to Ibrox now, and people can say whatever they like. I'm not going back to support a team that's let me down time and time again after me put my money in. I'm not going to European games. I'm not buying a ticket. So what's the point? I'm going to continue to let us down as fans. Then I'm not going to go and support you until you start having the tradition and the belief as Rangers Football Club should have. So hopefully the guys that have came in can come in and sort the mess out instead of going forward from the end of the season. But for the rest of this season, I've just kind of wrote it off, mate.
Fair enough. And there's a comment there from Scott05, Doug, which is the question I was going to come to you with. The club's standards over the last few years, they seem to have dropped so much with their celebrating mediocre achievements. Is this the most spineless you've seen the team top to bottom?
Yeah, perhaps. I think while the guys were talking there, I was reminded about the as well as like the walking about. There was I can't remember when it was now, but when they did the whole jumping up and down, connecting with the fans thing, that just felt a little bit off to me. But touching on what Dylan said there, about like you say, this terms of the standards slipping. I've come to the conclusion that the most damning part about the cup loss wasn't actually the loss itself. You could, if you wanted to, just go, well, those things happen, and they do. Liverpool lost the same day as well. So you can chalk that up to those happen. But the real thing that I think was the nail in the coffin was the post-match interview, where it just became so evident that I don't think Clement gets it. He doesn't understand how we feel and how he is being judged. He always, like Dylan says, he's always reaching for something to say, oh, well, we did this here, we beat them, we had this many shots. And he just doesn't realise that none of that matters. You didn't win the game. You haven't won anything. Well, you've won nothing this season. You're not going to win anything this season. It doesn't matter how many young players you bring through, how many shots you accumulate. None of that matters if you haven't won the trophies at the end of the season and at the end of the games. And it just feels like he doesn't quite get the way that the esteem that we hold our club in and the standard that we will hold them to. And for me, that's ultimately, I think, has become the most damning part of that. Is that it just became so obvious. He doesn't get it. I don't think he will get it. And that's why he's just going to trundle on until he's relieved of his duties.
Cammy, spineless top to bottom, am I right? Or am I being a bit dramatic?
No, I think you're it's fair. One thing I don't think we have. I don't know who it was that mentioned it previous. I don't know if it was Graham Souness about a year, 18 months ago, when he was sort of involved with James Bisgrove in the recruitment of Philip Clement. I don't think we have enough football people. I don't think we have enough people that understand what Rangers is about. I think that's a huge issue. This is where, at times, where you would what you would do for Sandy Jardine, Walter Smith, Jimmy Bell, all sadly no longer with us. But people like that, you go back, the guy Jim McAllister that followed Jimmy Bell was a big blue nose. There was obviously he left in acrimonious circumstances. All these people, you go back, the people up in the kitchens at Ibrox that have been part of the furniture through families and all that sort of situation. But I don't think we have enough people. You've got sort of lip service. You've got Barry Ferguson, you've got Lee McCulloch, you've got Mark Hateley, that are all ambassadors. But ultimately, what's there? I personally don't believe if they had any sort of influence to have conversations with the manager that he would even listen anyway. Mm-hmm. Because he's so arrogant and stubborn, and my way is the only way. Whereas you think back to Steven Gerrard, he would go for tea and coffee with Walter and catch up with him and bounce off his experience, because he had experienced Rangers. He knew what Rangers was all about. I genuinely believe if Walter was still with us now, that Philip Clement would probably think he knew better and wouldn't actually rely on that. So I think that's a huge factor, that you've got people like Barry and Lee McCulloch and what have you around the football club, but it's just effectively a hospitality PR sort of situation. I think people like that have to have more, I'm not saying influence in picking the team and all that sort of stuff, but just help them drive or embody a standard across the football club and get the messages into the players. And because I genuinely don't believe that there's enough of that within the dressing room, within the training ground, and across the football club as a whole. So that's just that's my rant between 40 and 45 minutes. So come back to me before the end.
I will do, mate. We can go for a whole hour. Scotty's telling us. So, Dylan, coming back to you, Cammy made he's undermined the point I was going to ask you, because I think he's actually 100% correct. Because I was going to ask you if Clement could get information or advice off of Walter, what would he give him? But Cammy says he probably wouldn't listen to him, would he?
No, he's that arrogant. It comes across, and because he's no willing. The thing is, when you had Gerrard, you could see when we lost a game that we maybe shouldn't have lost. You could see the emotion in the presser after it, and he was raging, or you'd see maybe his tying up was all undone. You'd like, he's went through him in there. With Clement, I don't really get that from him. He never blames himself. He never throws the players under the bus. He always blames the factors surrounding how hard the job it is to manage Rangers and how the rebuilding, like I said earlier. And I think Cammy's got it spot on. I don't think there's enough Rangers contingency from the board right down to the players and the squad for them to realise that just winning's not enough. You can't lose, you can't draw. And they think that, and I think it's hard to maybe instill that in players like Jeffy, who are young and Brazilian, but throughout the years, and I'm only 31, I know I don't look it, but we've always had that maybe Scottish contingency through the team, whether Walter's been about, even like Barry Ferguson was there, Neil McCann's been there. There's always been a Scottish element to say, well, this is what it means. This is not acceptable. And I don't think we've had that. We haven't had it for a long while. And when you employ somebody like Gerrard, I think the reason that maybe worked is because he came with that sort of stature, with that presence, and he also knew what it meant to play and be a hero for Liverpool. And he tried to translate that into Rangers. But even when he tried to do that, which is he done quite well, he then leaned on, like Cammy said, Walter and stuff like that, and as soon as to speak to tweak it. And even though Gio played with Rangers, he had that foreign approach to it, and it was calm and collective, and it didn't really work. So I think that's, and I was saying that to my brother and my dad earlier on. There you go, I know, that's true. They would have them up against the wall, and that's what's missing nowadays. And I just don't think that these players who are coming in understand what it means, not just to play for Rangers, but to go and make sure that they're giving their best every single game. And Yanis Hadji spoke in his press the other day, and he was apologetic. He was saying, look, we can only say sorry, but the fans need to know that we're just going to put on, every time you pull the shirt on, sorry, we need to give all as a Rangers player. And I think maybe he gets it, but I don't think that translates through the full team. This definitely doesn't translate through the manager. So I think it's a massive problem, and that's why I was happy when guys like Kevin Thompson came back. And even though he's in the 18s, I would like to see him in the first team, because he's always come across as somebody who absolutely understood what it meant to get the chance to go and play for Rangers and uphold the standards and let people know that that's not good enough. And I don't think that's not good enough.
Doug, that's a good actual point about like your Kevin Thompson's coming back. Obviously, close personal friend of mine now, but he's someone with modern coaching. He's coached youths and he could be useful in the first team. I don't want to cast aspersions on Alex Rae, but other than a couple of years he played for him, I don't know where we get this thing about him that he bleeds blue blood or whatever. So someone like Kevin Thompson, when you hear him speaking about the standards of Rangers, he's done it across various interviews, the high standards it is to be a Rangers player. He famously get brought in to the manager's room by Walter when he asked him how he thought he was doing, and he thought he was doing, I'm doing all right. Well, all right's not good enough. And someone like him who has had first-hand experience, or someone like Walter Smith managing them, that could be invaluable, I think. In the I'm not saying he should be the manager, but in the first team setup and not necessarily in the youths.
Yeah, for me, there's two sides to it. There's the Rangers standard side, which you get from someone like Thompson, who's been there and experienced that. But I think over the years I've come to the conclusion that if you're going to be a good Rangers manager, you have to be a bit of emotional. You have to have a bit of blood and thunder about you, because Rangers are like that. we have a bit of blood and thunder about us. We're a passionate support. We are energetic. And that was why I think at the time that we appointed him, Gerrard was the perfect appointment, because he had that emotional buy-in because of his career at Liverpool. He spent his entire career fighting for the club that he loved, trying to get them to win something when they were just and not quite getting there. And he came into us at a time where we were re-entering the league and looking to rediscover that for ourselves. And so it was kind of a marriage made in heaven, I felt, because he didn't need to be a Rangers man to understand those feelings and those emotions and those desires. And that's why I think sometimes we overplay the Rangers man aspect of it, because I think you can still understand all of that if you're that type of person. And I think that's where some of the managerial decisions have gone wrong, where we've not quite got the balance. And even Gerrard wasn't the perfect balance because he was still new and naive, so he didn't necessarily have the tactical nous. He obviously had Bale there to help him with that, and I think that's why they kind of worked as a combination. But then when Bale's come back, he's kind of collapsed on his own weight because he didn't have the other half of what made them work in the first place. And Clement just seems to lack that a little bit as well. I thought he had that at first, but the more he's been here, the more he just seems to be a bit too level-headed. He never seems to let himself go, other than when I see him on the touchline and he's angry. And over time, it seems like he potentially actually submits to that anger a little bit. Like there was the time, obviously, he pulled off Cantwell when he was not doing what he was told, and it did very much look like he got angry about it and pulled him off. And then in that cup game, there was at one point Hadji made a stray pass across the pitch, and the camera cut to Clement, and he looked furious. And a minute later, Hadji was off the pitch, and so I was kind of thinking to myself, has he made a quick decision there on the basis of that anger? And because if that's the case, you're not going to be a good manager. And so he's maybe got some skills, but it's just not there. So yeah, I think you need a bit of that balance. And like I say, I'm also really happy to see Thompson coming in. I think he's really good. He's got a lot of experience with youth players as well. So I think that's a really good position for him at this point in time. He's coming in, and like you say, he can feed the standards in early and teach them the key point that I hear a lot of people talk about for youth players, that they need to know that getting into the first team is step one, not goal achieved. And I think he'll be able, he'll help to put that through them. And when it comes to Alex Ray, he was a decent but not great player. It seems like he's a decent but not great coach. And so, yeah, I've nothing against him at all, but we maybe just need a bit better.
Curry, I'm going to maybe come back to that question if we do have time. I do want to talk about it, but Cammy, the problem with these managers we've appointed, the last three managers, to be fair, is probably the people appointing them haven't been the right people. Now, obviously, Graham Souness was involved in the last, the involvement of Lampard and Clement and Muscat, and he kind of openly, this is Souness, kind of disagreed with who the choice was in the end. Now, Graham Souness hasn't managed in a long time, but he hasn't been at the club for a long time, but he's been affected by his time at this club, and he knows what it means to play here and to manage here. What I'm trying to get at is the people making the decision if Clement had to go. Do you trust that? I know Patrick Stewart is now going to be the one, but you're still going to get this infighting at the board level, all putting their little load in, aren't you?
100%. I think you've still got there's no great trust in the people at the top of the club that are going to be involved in that decision-making process. This is where, go back to my earlier point with regard to football people, Graham Souness was involved, and then that was it, sort of situation. They couldn't come to an agreement with regard to a role for him. But it is an issue. I've said changing the manager is inevitable, but it doesn't guarantee, whilst there's so many other structural issues that are still trying to be fixed. It's not a magic bullet that's going to suddenly make us Pep's Barcelona. So yeah, there is a worry, but I would hope that Niels Koppen, assuming that comes under his remit, that there is names in the frame that they have been as part of recruitment you do for any position. Surely there's a sort of contingency plan. But the Kevin Thompson, I don't think it genuinely matters who the local coach is. I think that's probably what it was defined as at the time he was appointed. The manager's so stubborn and so arrogant that it's only his way. I don't think it would matter whether it was Alex Rae, Barry Ferguson, Richard Gough, John Brown, Ali McCoist. I genuinely don't think. I think it's lip service. He's there to put the cons out. He's a blue nose. There's no any doubt at all about that. But I don't think Alex Rae or anybody has any actual influence. It's very much the manager and his assistant, and I think the rest of them are all just there to do what it is. And to answer Nicholas, who would you bring in? I have not got a clue, because it's again, to repeat what I've said, there's so many other wider issues, and I feel like I have spoken for about 45 minutes tonight, but there's so many issues across the football club that need to be addressed in order for us to become a sort of functional football club.
Dylan, Graham Souness was arrogant, but Graham Souness won leagues and he won trophies. Fair enough, didn't do particularly well in Europe, but being arrogant it's not necessarily a bad thing, certainly when it comes to the Rangers manager, but there's a level where it's a different type of arrogance, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And like, I'm not old enough to remember Souness or the team back then, but
you look at me.
I know, so I've seen by the comments, to be fair.
Sorry.
No, but I think, like you say, it's a different type of arrogance. Come on, like Cam said, he's arrogant. It's his way or no way, and he thinks his way is right. And a lot of managers don't change their style of play or won't change it. But I don't even think, like, Gerrard it was always a team with Gerrard. I don't know why we keep touching back on him. But it was always it was when he won the manager of the month, it was him, Mick Beale, Tom Coulshaw, Gary McAllister. It was a full team. Whereas I think, come on, we got that podium myself and with the champagne and spirit all himself. That's the way it comes across. And then there's just no empathy towards us as fans. It's all about poor me, and that's the reason that I don't relate to him. I don't like him, because that's no Rangers. It'd be better suited across the city with that attitude. That's the way I feel. It's, I've had these injuries and I've been hamstrung with finances, and we could have done more in January, and it's just excuse after excuse after excuse. Hold your hands up and say, I got it wrong. We weren't prepared well enough. I gave the players time off. I probably shouldn't have. That's on me. Apologise to the fans who turned up and who's not spent their money. But from now on, here's what we're going to work on and try and do to at least close the point gap. We're going to try and do as well as we can in Europe. If you stick with us at the end of the season, blah, 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 and try and get the fans on your side. But it just tries, these comments, it just seems to divide us more and more and more. And he's just digging his own grave at this point.
Doug, we're nearly at the hour, so I'm sorry I'm not giving you a full chance to retort, but please, you start us off with some final thoughts on this past week and just anything you never get a chance to say.
On the point of arrogance, I think we have a tendency to use the word arrogant just for people we don't like or that we don't like the attitude of. When you're talking about someone like Graham Souness, a multi-league winner as both player and manager across multiple countries, he's not arrogant. He's just confident because he knows, he is a successful player. He's a successful manager. People talk about it with Ronaldo a lot because Ronaldo's obviously very full on. But I mean, it's hard to say that Ronaldo's arrogant when you look at everything he's done in his career and the drive and not just natural ability, but the drive and passion and focus that he quite clearly has and has always had to make himself the best possible footballer he could be. And so sometimes, it's not necessarily arrogance. It's just we want to find someone who's got that confidence that's backed up by something. And so that's what I think we want to be looking for. It's like, look for someone who's got a bit of that fire, got a bit of that passion, is confident, but there's something there that backs it up. There's something there that says it's not just the person, it's there's a record there. Jose Mourinho's another famous example. Mourinho can turn around and say, well, when I go to places, those places win things. He's the only manager post Ferguson who won multiple trophies. And I think he was the first manager to win trophies, I think, as well, because that's what he does. And obviously, we're not getting someone of that stature, but we need a little bit. We need to rediscover a bit of that confidence. We are Rangers Football Club. We have a backbone of success, of winning things. Yes, the last period has been poor, like Cammy said, the last 10, 20 years, but that's 10, 20 years out of 150 plus. So we need to, my closing thought is that's what we need to rediscover and remember, that, we are Rangers, we win trophies, and that's what we need to rediscover, the confidence to do that. If we get that confidence up, that's what turns you into a winner, is that you may not necessarily be the greatest, but if you've got that confidence behind you, that wind in your sails, you can push that little extra. And I think that's where Curry's comment you mentioned about should Clement stay, or if Clement stays. Clement could stay, and we could sort out a bunch of stuff, get new players in that are better, that aren't injured all the time. And maybe he does better because the players are better. But the thing I think he would always be lacking is the ability to eke that little extra out when they're not at their best. Because quite clearly they're not at their best right now, and he seems incapable of getting that little extra out of them. And that's, we talk about that with captaincies as well. It's trying to help to get that little extra, and that's what we need. And we need to focus on that. And that's why the standards are important, because the standards will allow us to remember what it means to be Rangers, and therefore push that into all areas of the club.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, for that final thought there. And it's been a good pod when Scotty tells us to go long. So, yeah, thanks for being a part of it. Dylan, thanks again, mate. Anything you wanted to add to the end of this? You're muted, I'm afraid. We nearly get through a pod without it.
Sorry. I says, if you want to put yourself through it again, going back and watch the tactical breakdown on the Queen's Park game, you'll see exactly where we went wrong on it. Me and Dave done a wee podcast on it last night, so go and check that out.
No harm publicising it again, mate. Thank you very much for doing that. And Cammy, mate, hopefully you feel a wee bit better after this hour than you did at the beginning of it. Thanks for coming on, mate. And anything else to say?
No, not really. Just thanks for listening, and thanks for the engagement and the comments. I think I'm glad I've waited until Friday to do this. It does. I must admit, I don't feel that I've been particularly coherent, and it has been a bit ranty at times. But just try to get across how I feel. We all just want a Rangers that we deserve on the park. There's Doug's spot on with regard to. I have no issue at all with arrogance. I loved Souness as Rangers manager. I loved Souness when he was playing in the middle of the park. But Souness was prepared to listen to. He had Walter Smith by his side. He was prepared to actually listen to other viewpoints, and that's where I think we've recruited the wrong man, and it is what it is. But we just have to hope moving forward that we become a better Rangers on and off the park, and we don't have to do many more of these. But I've got the pre and the post-match pod on Sunday to look forward to, so I'm going to enjoy the next couple of days, and then hopefully Rangers don't spoil my Sunday.
No, thanks, Cammy, and thanks for coming on. Just on that point, actually, you're right about what you say about Walter Smith. I don't think there's anybody in that backroom team that he listens to. So, he's not got the same kind of... We can compare his arrogance to Graham Souness, but Graham Souness was prepared to listen to someone like Walter Smith, and I don't think he would, even if Walter was still here. But look, everyone, thank you very much for watching this evening. Thank you very much, as Cammy said, for the engagements, the comments. Please like and subscribe to the channel. We are still growing. We're also on all the podcast apps, so if you like to listen to podcasts, you can listen back to this one at your leisure. So thank you very much for watching, and remember, every night is a Rangers Journal night. Good night.